The baby was sleeping. That was the first thing Richard Hartley noticed when he finally got inside the Rasmussen house on the night of October 24, 1953. The 20-month-old girl that his daughter Evelyn had been hired to watch was tucked in, breathing softly, completely unharmed, completely unaware that something had torn through that house like a hurricane and left behind a silence that Richard Hartley would spend the rest of his life trying to understand. His daughter was gone, and the baby slept on. Let's start where the story starts. Not at the beginning, but at the exact moment everything broke open. Because that is the only honest place to begin. It was a Saturday evening in La Crosse, Wisconsin, late October. The kind of autumn night that arrives in the American Midwest with genuine intention. Cold air, bare black branches, dead leaves, skittering across sidewalks. The last of the light gone by 5. The town was the kind of place where people knew each other's names, where a college professor hiring the daughter of a fellow professor for babysitting felt as natural and safe as anything could feel in 1953 America. Viggo Rasmussen taught at La Crosse State College. His colleague Richard Hartley also taught there. Their lives ran parallel the way lives in small academic communities do. Faculty meetings, shared hallways, familiar faces. When Rasmussen needed someone to watch his 20-month-old daughter that Saturday, hiring Evelyn Hartley was obvious. She was 15 years old, responsible, the kind of girl that parents trusted without hesitation. Evelyn had one simple arrangement with her father. She would call home at 8:30 p.m. to check in. It was a small thing, a single phone call to say everything was fine. 8:30 came, no call. Richard waited, the way fathers wait, telling himself there was a reasonable explanation. She got distracted. The baby needed something. She lost track of time. He called the Rasmussen house. The phone rang. Nobody answered. He called again. Still nothing. He called a third time into the ringing silence, and then he stopped waiting and got in his car. The drive to the Rasmussen house was short. It felt long when Richard arrived. The lights were on inside the house. The radio was playing. Both details that should have suggested normalcy: a lit house, music. An ordinary evening, but instead produced a feeling Richard could not name. Something between relief and dread existing in the same breath. He went to the front door, locked. He tried another entry point, also locked. He found a way inside, and what he walked into has haunted every person who has ever studied this case. Because what Richard Hartley found inside that house was not the aftermath of something clean or simple. It was the evidence of a struggle, of a scene interrupted violently mid-motion. The living room furniture had been moved, chairs out of place, a table shifted. The kind of displacement that does not happen during a quiet evening of babysitting. Evelyn's school books were scattered, not stacked neatly the way a studious 15-year-old sets them when she sits down to do homework, between checking on a sleeping child. Then Richard found her shoes, one shoe upstairs, one shoe downstairs. Think about that geography for a moment. Not both shoes in one room. Not kicked off at the door the way teenagers do. One shoe on a different floor than the other, as though someone had been moving fast and chaotically through the house, or being moved. Something had happened between the upstairs and the downstairs, and the shoes were the breadcrumbs of that terrible in-between. Then he found her glasses, broken, upstairs. Evelyn Hartley wore glasses. She needed them to see. Finding them broken on the floor was not the discovery of a misplaced accessory, it was the discovery of a moment of violence, of a struggle close enough and forceful enough to snap the frames from her face. Richard searched every room. Every room was locked from the inside except one. The basement. At the back of the basement there was a window. The screen that should have covered it had been removed and was leaning against the outside wall neatly, almost deliberately, as though whoever had used that window had taken a moment to lean it there rather than knock it aside. A short stepladder belonging to the Rasmussen family had been positioned directly beneath the open window from the outside. Someone had used it to climb in. Pry marks were found on several of the home's windows. That detail matters enormously, because pry marks are not the evidence of impulse. Pry marks are preparation. Pry marks means someone stood at those windows before that night, possibly well before that night, and tested them, felt for weakness. Assess the entry points of a house where a teenage girl would be alone on a Saturday evening with a sleeping baby. Whoever took Evelyn Hartley had done this before, or had planned doing this for long enough to case the location. Then investigators found the blood inside the house first, then in the yard. Then, and this is the detail that turns the stomach, bloody handprints on a wall approximately 100 feet away in a nearby garage. And more blood in a neighboring house. The trail of blood moving away from the Rasmussen property told a story that no one in La Crosse, Wisconsin wanted to read. Evelyn had been hurt. She had been moved. She had been taken wounded and conscious, or wounded and not out of that basement window, across the yard, past the garage, through the dark Wisconsin night, and then she was gone. The investigation that followed was one of the largest in Wisconsin's history at that point. Law enforcement flooded La Crosse. The FBI became involved. Volunteers searched the surrounding countryside. The Mississippi River was dragged. Forests were combed. Tips poured in from across the state and beyond. They found nothing. Not Evelyn. Not her body. Not a confirmed suspect. A few items of clothing were discovered in the days and weeks that followed, articles believed to belong to Evelyn, found miles from La Crosse, suggesting she had been transported. The blood evidence pointed to serious injury. Investigators were privately certain she had not survived. But without a body, there was no confirmation, no closure, no grave to stand at. The case generated suspects. It always does. A community in fear looks at the people around it differently. The neighbor who seemed odd. The stranger seen near the college. The man whose alibi felt thin. Several individuals were investigated. At least one man became a person of significant interest, a convicted sex offender who had been in the La Crosse area at the time, and whose behavior in subsequent years would do nothing to eliminate him from consideration. His name was never publicly confirmed as the perpetrator. No one's was. Here is where the betrayal lives in this story. Not a betrayal by a person, but a betrayal by time itself, by the limitations of 1953 forensic science. There was blood evidence. There were footprints. There were pry marks and a stepladder and a removed window screen. There was a trail of handprints leading away from the house. In 2023, those details would have produced DNA profiles, geographic profiling, digital forensic reconstruction. In 1953, they produced theories, and grief. Richard Hartley spent years searching for his daughter, the way fathers do when there is no body, and therefore no permission to stop. He followed leads. He answered calls from people who thought they had seen her. He carried the particular torment of a parent with no ending, no grave, no confirmed answer. Just the open wound of a Saturday evening in October that simply never resolved. Viggo and his wife carried their own version of that weight. The knowledge that their home had been chosen, that their normal evening out had created the circumstance, that the window in their basement had been the entry point for something that destroyed another family. The baby grew up. She grew up, not knowing what had passed through the house the night she slept unharmed in her crib. She grew up in the strange grace of having been the most vulnerable person in that house, and the only one nothing happened to. Evelyn Hartley would be in her mid-80s today. Instead, she is 15 forever. Frozen on a Saturday night in 1953, with her school books on the floor and one shoe upstairs and one shoe down, and her broken glasses lying where they fell, and the baby breathing softly in the next room, and the radio playing to an empty house. Her case has never been officially solved. It remains open. And every few years, a new investigator, a new true crime researcher, a new family member of someone long dead revisits the evidence and asks the same question that Richard Hartley drove through the dark Wisconsin night to answer 70 years ago. Where is Evelyn? The silence that answers back is the same silence that answered the telephone at 8:30 p.m. on October 24, 1953. Absolute, unbroken, merciless. There are cases that haunt a community for a generation. There are cases that haunt it forever. La Crosse, Wisconsin carries Evelyn Hartley the way certain towns carry their losses. Not loudly, not always consciously, but permanently. In the way a house remembers a fire long after the walls have been repainted. In the way a father's hands remember a steering wheel grip too tight on a drive that changed everything. Somewhere in the American Midwest, in the cold dark of a Wisconsin October, a 15-year-old girl with broken glasses and mismatched shoes walked out of history and into mystery, and the baby slept on.